Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here in the historic Max Factor building, which houses the Hollywood Museum, and I'm with director Jeffrey Schwarz, I said it right, and artist John Van Hamersveld. Award-winning documentarian Jeffrey Schwarz is the leading producer of studio EPKs. He's made films on different subjects: Vito, William Castle, Jack Wrangler, and the drag superstar Divine, and upcoming Tab Hunter. But tell us what an EPK is.
An EPK, I don't know if I'm the leading producer, but that's what I've been doing for a living for a long time. An EPK, that stands for Electronic Press Kit.
Yes.
So every time you're watching, Entertainment Tonight, and you see a behind the scenes of the making of a movie, the guy with the clapper and the actors and the director doing their thing, somebody has to film all that stuff and package it. And that's what I do, and also for DVD extras.
Do you go on the set and do that?
Yes, oftentimes on the set.
Oh,
oftentimes,
you are?
Yeah, and then oftentimes for the DVD bonus materials, that's what I produce. I produce all that material, a lot of that material.
So you're there the whole time the film is being made?
Not every day, but sometimes there's a certain amount of days that are allocated for the EPK crew to be on set. And I started a company that produced EPKs and DVD extras, and that's been keeping me busy for a long time.
What's DVD extra?
When you rent a DVD or buy a DVD, there's the behind the scenes. That studios like to call it added value because it adds value to the DVDs.
And so it's like you backstage filming something, or you're back there showing how they're putting their costumes on or whatever?
Yeah, a lot of that, or sometimes it'll be a movie that is released many years later on DVD, and it's more of a retrospective. So I just did recently Raging Bull and Footloose. So it's talking about how the movies were made many years later, interviews with the directors,
do you go
the stars.
and interview the directors?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you learned anything? You're doing your own documentaries, so have you learned anything? Who were you with? Scorsese and
I've gotten to work with some of my favorite directors of all time. Wes Craven and Jonathan Demme and Martin Scorsese. So many directors over the years.
And so do you just go in with your camera and sit the person down like we're doing right
pretty
here
much
and
like
ask
this.
questions?
Well, I don't go on camera. That's my worst.
No, but I mean,
my worst nightmare is going on camera. So
I
we're
know
living
what you mean.
it. We're living it right now.
But have you learned anything from those directors when you go to do your own work?
Well, I learned so much. I haven't directed a narrative film yet. I hope to do that.
You're going to do that next?
I hope to do that. I don't know about next, but I hope to do that. But getting to sit down with these filmmakers who are so inspiring to me personally. Especially somebody like or Scorsese, who not only can talk about his own films, but is also a historian of other films and film history.
Oh, he loves that.
So and he's very big on film restoration and film preservation.
How do you decide on the content of what to put in that?
Well, something like Raging Bull, it's a 30-year-old film. So the last version that we did was a Blu-ray re-release of Raging Bull.
Yeah, you threw all these names out, and I was like, what is he talking about?
Well, on something like Raging Bull, the making of that film has been talked about so much. So we try to find other ways to talk about a film. So on the Raging Bull, we actually interviewed retired boxers who were sharing their memories of Jake LaMotta.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
So that's the backstory, pretty much. And okay, so tell me how you decided to make the film about Vito.
Vito was the film that came out last year, and it premiered on HBO. And it's called Vito, and it's about a gay activist and film historian named Vito Russo. And Vito Russo wrote a very famous book called The Celluloid Closet that came out in the early 80s. And it was the first time that anybody had sat down to tell the story of how gay and lesbian people were represented in Hollywood films.
Was he in New York?
He was a New Yorker.
He was. He was in New York. He was a
you
friend
ran
of
into
Andy
him.
Warhol.
I don't know if I'm sure he ran into Andy Warhol.
I think he was,
He knew
because I
everybody.
remember the name.
He knew I bet you met him at some point. Yeah, he knew everybody.
And then how did you get a hold of the people to interview?
Well, with Vito passed away in 1990, so obviously wasn't able to talk to Vito, but I was very close with his good friends Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, and they're filmmakers that Rob made The Times of Harvey Milk, and
yes.
Rob and Jeffrey together made a film called Common Threads, which was about the Names Project and the AIDS quilt.
Right,
and Vito is actually,
great.
it's an amazing film, won the Oscar. And Vito's in that film. When he was still around,
That's
he's
what,
in
yeah,
that.
I remember
Yeah.
that. And then how did you pick William Castle?
And William Castle, someone that I always loved and adored. Actually, John Waters turned me on to William Castle because John Waters wrote an essay about William Castle, who's John's favorite movie director. And the essay was called Whatever Happened to Showmanship. And the reason it's called that is because William Castle in the 1950s and into the 60s, he was the king of the gimmicks. He made low-budget horror films.
Oh, he did that?
Yeah.
Of course John would love that.
Yeah, I mean, and John went to see those movies when he was a kid.
Right.
The most famous one is probably a movie called The Tingler. And The Tingler is a movie about a monster that lives on your spine, and it feeds on your fear. So if you're scared,
really scared.
and you don't, but you have to scream. If you don't scream, the Tingler will kill you. It will break your spine. So the only way to vanquish the Tingler is to scream. So in the movie, a Tingler actually gets loose in a movie theater, and at that moment where the Tingler in the movie gets loose, it also gets loose in your theater where you're sitting and watching the movie.
It was
in your theater. And what they did was they wired the seats
They
with the
did
little
do that?
electric seat buzzers that went off.
You're
And it
kidding.
shocked the audience. It was supposed to be the Tingler attacking you, right? And the only way to vanquish the Tingler in the theater in real life is to scream for your lives. So Vincent Price is in the movie.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and he comes on the loudspeaker and says, "Everyone scream for your lives," and the whole audience goes crazy and starts
kidding.
screaming. And so John was at that film.
He
so
loved that.
John kind of turned me on to Castle, and then
And how'd you find people who knew him? Or he
Well,
wasn't still around?
No, he died in
No.
'77.
Yeah.
But I connected with his daughter, Terry Castle, who
Oh.
loved her dad and is trying to keep the Castle name alive.
Ah.
We interviewed so many people for that film.
That's fantastic. And how long, so far, how long was Vito? How long was Castle?
Vito, you mean the length of the film?
Yes.
Oh, Vito was about 90 minutes. Castle was like 82 minutes, something like that.
So they're full-length.
They're full-length feature films.
And Wrangler?
Wrangler's 82 minutes or so. That was also independently done. Did you ever run into Jack Wrangler?
No, tell us about him.
Jack Wrangler was
Maybe I did.
I'll bet you did. Well, do you know Margaret Whiting, the singer?
Yes.
Margaret Whiting was in a relationship with Jack for 30 years. They were together. Jack Wrangler was basically a porn star. He was in the Boogie Nights era in the 70s of porn. He started as a gay porn star, and then he transitioned into being a straight porn star, but he was gay the whole time, and he lost his straight virginity on camera in a movie. So he had a really interesting story because he was a child of Hollywood. His dad was a movie producer.
Oh, he was?
His dad was one of the producers of Bonanza. He was Stanley Kramer's partner. So Jack was born into kind of Hollywood royalty, and he wanted to be a legit, quote-unquote, legit actor, but it wasn't really happening for him. So one thing led to another, and it was the 70s, and he fell into doing porn. And he was very happy doing that. He changed his name from Jack Stillman to Jack Wrangler, which is a very macho kind of name.
Yes, it is.
And he developed a reputation as like the macho man of gay porn, and he created quite a following.
You must have had a lot of people to interview for that.
Sure,
because
well, Jack
it was all
himself.
Hollywood, right?
Jack himself was in
well,
it.
What did he say about it?
Well, you know,
What
this was
happened?
only a 10-year period of his life, and he was just following what he was
His
just
youth?
following. Yeah, he was a very, very attractive guy. He saw it was after gay liberation, so a lot of gay men were looking for role models and were trying to look at the macho role models because they were trying to shed the stereotypes. You know, they were like, we're not sissies, we're like real men, right? And Jack created this kind of cartoon character of macho,
this
right?
guy.
So,
And now talking about that and going to someone who created something else, created a
Yes.
female persona, Divine.
Exactly right. I mean, with
the next one
Jack
that?
Wrangler, you know, it was kind of drag, but it was like macho butch drag,
Right.
and Divine was another kind of drag, right?
Right.
So I kind of I'm attracted to these kinds of characters who develop these personas for themselves, very larger than life personas, maybe to cover up some insecurities that they might have had.
But Divine was really larger than life.
could
These
say that
other
again.
people weren't like that, were they?
I think Jack was. I mean,
Was
Jack.
he?
If you see the film, I mean, he was sort of towering above.
Oh, he was?
There was a big, cutout billboard of him standing above the Vista Theater in Silver Lake.
Oh, there
so he was
was?
literally larger than life.
So how did you decide on, well, you know John Waters, so is that how you decided on Divine?
You know, that's kind of probably where it started. I mean, even before I saw Divine in the films, I read all about them because they were kind of these forbidden movies when I was a kid. There was a book called Cult Movies, and Cult Movies, it was like the 100 most, dangerous, craziest, most forbidden films. And Pink Flamingos was one of them, and it described in loving detail everything that happened in Pink Flamingos. And I couldn't believe this movie actually existed. And it wasn't until years later that I actually got to see the film.
So when you do a movie like this, or any of those movies, do you write it first and then go after what you want, or do you go after what's there and then write it?
It's a little of both. I mean, with Divine, it's a life, it's biography. So there are certain conventions of a biography. I mean, I kind of like to tell the story fairly chronologically.
So you have an outline? Do you start with an outline of what you want?
Just reading everything I can. And with Divine, I mean, I had been obsessed with John and Divine and all the films since, for many, many years.
So let's talk about this the most, the process, because it's called I Am Divine. It's been in film festivals all over the world, which is fantastic.
And you're in it, by the way.
Well, thank you. Thanks for putting me in it. But I was a great friend of Divine's, and he stayed at our house all the time. So I should have been in it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, you were one of the people that came pretty early on. This is you're one of the people I wanted to talk to because of your relationship with him.
So you have this outline of what you want to do. And you have the people in the outline, or you have the story in the outline?
I have a sense of the story in the outline, but you never know what people are going to bring to the table.
I know.
That whole story you told, I mean, I knew kind of where you fit in the timeline of Divine's life. I knew where you kind of entered the picture, but I didn't know about your whole story about Divine staying on your couch and kind of moving in, and how you were instrumental in bringing him into the LA world of artists and writers. I didn't know about any of that.
Which he loved, and New York too. And I was in New York the other day, and he was on the top of that building on 57th Street. And if he could look down on what's there now, he would have just loved it. The big Louis Vuitton is over there.
Yeah, he could go shopping downstairs.
Yes, exactly. Right? But then you start out finding people to interview. Do all the people want to be interviewed?
With this particular project, most people wanted to be in it because there's so much. Everyone loved him so much, and John Waters was the first person I talked to, and I wanted to make sure he was comfortable with it. That if he
you mean with the people you were interviewing?
No, with me making it at all. I wanted
see.
to make sure because John, I needed his support, and he gave me his support right away, knowing my work, and he also talked to all the people I wanted to interview. And said, if Jeffrey calls you, I support this, I'm behind this.
Because the thing with John and the way, that's why I'm asking if you wrote it, because John has this little thread that follows all through it, I found, which is really nice because it's about the films that he made and about making Divine a star, which is what he always wanted to be.
That's right. I mean, Divine and John grew up very close to each other in Baltimore. They met when they were about 17 years old, which is amazing. It went back that far. And John wanted to be famous. Divine wanted to be famous. John was more of the underground. He was very attracted to underground films. Divine loved Elizabeth Taylor and movie stars and glamour. So the two of them together, there was an underground sensibility, and then there was the glamour sensibility that kind of meshed.
Yeah, it was really great. Do you do all the editing?
No, I don't do the editing. I have an editor on this film. My editor was Philip Bartell.
And then how did you shoot it? I mean, you called me over for one day and we sat down and we talked.
Yeah, you schedule. Well, for the shooting, it's sort of starting to talk to the people and figuring out what role that they might play in the film. I have a sense of what I'd like to talk to them about, but it could go anywhere. I mean,
can your editor change it? Can your editor change it? Well, he's going like, look, this is another whole way we haven't thought about.
I think the first pass, I go through all the interviews and kind of make selects on what I think might be important, and I pass that all along to my editors. I have a sense of what the story might be, and like I said, it's fairly chronological.
But you're willing to open it up and change if it changes.
Things come up that I didn't expect, like that whole story about Divine in L.A. that you tell.
Yeah.
That was something I didn't really know, and it fit in. It's in the film, and it's a wonderful moment because it's Divine being accepted by artists and writers.
I see, which is what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Now you're working on something with Tab Hunter, who was also in the film and who was also a good friend of ours at the time.
That's right. Tab Hunter co-starred with Divine in a movie called Polyester, which was this hilarious movie with Divine playing a miserable housewife, basically, who has an affair with Tab Hunter. And Tab at the time, he was the biggest star of the 50s, but by the time the late 70s and the early 80s rolled around, he wasn't really getting those roles in Hollywood.
No career.
No career, really, pretty much. Really. He was active in dinner theater and he was doing TV, but his star was done for him.
And a lovely guy.
Lovely guy.
Lovely
guy.
So
John called him to be the star, and he said yes, which they couldn't believe, because that was the first time that John Waters and Divine had worked with a real legit Hollywood star. And John wrote the part especially for Tab, and there was a love scene. He would have to do a love scene with Divine, and he treated Divine like any other leading lady like Natalie Wood or Sophia Loren, you know, he showed great respect to Divine, and it's a hilarious movie.
That's great. Well, we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be the next
Thank
one.
you so much, Jeffrey.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And don't go away. We'll be right back with artist John Van Hamersveld. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with artist, illustrator John Van Hamersveld, who was born in Maryland and raised there in Townsend, and also the rest of his youth was in Palos Verdes. He went to Art Center College in Chenard, and he taught his skills at Cal Arts, Otis Parsons, and Art Center College of Design. As the art director at Capitol Records, he designed record covers and at his own Pinnacle studio, posters to promote those rock concerts and records. And in the 80s, am I going through your whole life? In the 80s, he moved towards the corporate world, where he was creating logos and letterings and different things for commercial endeavors. In the 90s, to the Cool House studio in Santa Monica, where his work continues through the 2000s. So you have 2 books or 3 books or how many books?
Yeah, there's 3
John?
books that
My
will be
Art, My
by
Life.
August. Yeah.
My Art, My Life.
Yeah.
The memoir.
The memoir. Yeah.
And you started writing
Well,
that.
I started writing probably about 10 years ago, you know, and then worked with editors and people about it, you know, to find interest in it. You have to find interest first
Yes,
of all.
but
you know.
you've been involved with all those people for other people, haven't you?
Yes,
for all these
exactly.
years? So
Yeah,
you knew,
yeah.
you knew what the interest would be.
Not as the writer's point of view.
No.
No, you know, editorially, you always took the writing and forgot about it and made graphic statements.
Oh,
you know.
that's right. But
And-
you had to read the writing to get the
No,
graphics, didn't you?
No, you just skim them, or someone tells you the story, or whatever.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a grease and water process.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
The writers are with the editor, and the graphics are with the artist or the art director who's running the design.
So are there designs in My Art, My Life?
Some pictures,
Some
yeah.
pictures.
Yeah, but they're warped, sort of, yeah.
But then you did 50 years of graphic
Graphic design.
graphic design.
Yeah, so
And
then this one is all the...
that's this one we're looking
Yeah,
at.
it's 50 years of the moments, you know, between 1961 and
what is
2003.
it? Tell us what it is.
Pardon me?
Tell us what completely it is inside.
Inside, it's all the moments that you would see by a graphic designer moving through a culture, and many levels of the culture and different points of view.
I'm going to just pick this up. Well, it all started with The Endless Summer, right?
Yeah, it all starts with The Endless Summer.
And tell us how and why.
So the movie is from the Southern California surf culture. It goes to New York. It's introduced to New York as a 35 millimeter, which normally it was always a 16 millimeter.
Ah.
And made a big splash publicity-wise, and then the poster was taken by a vendor and distributed around the world.
And you were still in school at the time?
I was still in school.
That's what's so amazing. Another part of what you're talking about would be this.
Yeah, it would be
part
the
of
album
art.
covers. This is around 1984
I
for
see.
John Lydon.
I see. So it goes through that. I'm
Yeah.
going to go through that and ask you those questions because I want to talk about your time at Capitol Records.
So Capitol, it's an interesting story because someone leads me over there, and I take my Endless Summer poster over
because
there.
you still have...
And it's just out, right? And I've had it for like 3 months or something like that. And I show it to the art director, and then he says, he reaches over to his cabinet and he grabs the Endless Summer soundtrack by the
yes,
Sandells.
that was very
yeah,
big, right.
with the Beach Boys and all that. So he tells me to come back, or he'll call me in 3 weeks. So he calls me in 3 weeks, and he has me over. But I go to the 8th floor this time, into the executive suite, and to see Brown Meggs. And Brown Meggs ran the distribution, but he also signed the Beatles to the label. So I became his personal art director.
So as an art director, what does an art director do? Do you take the pictures? Do you put them? Use somebody else's
You're sort of
pictures?
like a media architect.
I know, it's like,
And you gather all the parts and pieces and points of view and the meetings and the trade and the distribution.
you don't have to be a musician then.
No.
To be working at Capitol
Well, you have
Records.
to hang out there. Yeah. Well, you know, because art school was so arty and musical and everything, it was just a great thing to do.
But we didn't expect you to take the pictures of the person who's on the album cover or that kind of thing.
I later did that.
Oh, you did do
Yeah,
that?
I always carried a Leica with me, so I did that kind of thing.
And did you use those?
And I used them, yes, yeah. But
Okay.
most of the time I worked with other photographers, but
Right.
But it's the art director having an eye, choosing the
I
right
got it.
shots for the media.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
it. So you tell your photographer what you want.
It's like being a DP, sort
Right,
of like a
okay.
director.
And then what happened at Pinnacle Studios?
Pinnacle Studios was an idea, like a happening, and I pulled all this community of kids together, you know, from school, and we did these big events on the weekends at the Shrine Exposition Hall. So you'd have 4,500 people there, you know, of the hippie movement.
Really?
Yeah, with the light shows and the.
I don't remember those.
And you know, someone like George Lucas would be in the light show booth, you know, showing his films or something like that.
And then you were also producing posters and
And
things
I produced,
in your
yeah. So basically, I took the media and then created the idea and formed the groups. I was a producer at that point.
Producer at that
Yeah,
point.
Right.
But you were still art directing what was going on
Right.
as
right,
well.
Right.
Okay, and then you moved into
As you move through, like working with film, you know, you have everybody's your tool in a sense, and you make all the maneuvers to get an end result to produce the film or produce the event.
You call Capitol Records a corporate? Well, no.
It was corporate. It was more the establishment at that time versus the underground. You know, so I.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Wasn't
So
it?
I was firmly implanted in the in the alternative culture, the
So you
hippie
were
culture.
you were implanted there, but you were working.
Yes,
for
by
the
day.
cor-
You know, so as an artist. You know, early on, I went from high school as a AE painter, or EA, yeah, abstract expressionism, AE, and through that, when you enter art school, then it's what it is. You know, it's painting and drawing and all that stuff. But I took these technical classes and design classes for the fact that I liked media, because the TV was so huge at that time.
But did you ever think that you were going to be a painter? I mean, you were in
Well,
art
yeah, as a
school. You were
kid,
going to be
yeah,
a painter,
yeah,
right?
In art school, you think that you are going to paint, right?
Yeah, but then you took these other classes.
But like Warhol, you saw that it was a multimedia world.
Yes,
you know,
it was.
and that you could do all kinds of different things. And so the happening and the individual piece, you know, the personal drawing, you know, letter forms, stories, poems, songs.
You put all that together
Yes,
and
right,
design
yeah.
all of that.
Right, yeah.
But that's what everybody always thought about Andy's work when you bring up Warhol, that it was pure graphics.
Right, he was a graphic designer basically that funneled into at a very appropriate time. Well, you know, he had an illustration career for 10 years.
Yes.
There, you know, so then he
yes.
decided he wanted something different. You know, and he saw the media changing into an art form of which he could produce in photographs as well as movies and have. You know,
Did do
paintings.
the whole
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
which is what your
Which
studio
became
did.
the party, yeah.
Pinnacle was the party.
Like the
the
factory,
corporate
yeah.
logos were like for clothing.
Yeah, later on, the clothing world of Southern California, the
Fashion
surf
world.
culture, yeah, the
Right.
surf
Oh,
culture.
surf culture more.
Surf culture. So you had Gotcha and Jimmy Z, you know, and Quicksilver. These were like phenomena going on in
And
the
were
80s.
you doing the logos? Were you making the logos? Is that what
yeah,
you do?
Yeah, but you're also helping the salespeople market the application of that. So let's say I do the logo for Contempo Casuals. So they made 225 stores across the country.
Oh, that's right.
You know, and then it was on the label of their clothes
So
as well.
you did all of that,
Yeah.
and it goes to
So it's a
250
program.
stores.
Yeah,
I see.
It's a program. It's like
Do you keep up with it then to make sure that it's done
yes,
the way
right.
you want
well,
it to
again,
be?
you're directing as you go through it. You know.
You also worked with restaurants.
Yes, yeah, Kate.
Oh, Kate Manalini.
Yeah, Kate
Did you do
Manalini.
the Kate up
Yeah,
there?
yeah. It's a landmark. You know, it's a wonderful sign that sits there.
And you worked with the architect then, who was a great architect.
Yes, great architect. Morphus is a great architect. But it was really Mrs. Lewis who you know, brought everybody in to do that thing. You know?
She found all of you and brought you together?
Yeah, and then we get the model there, you know, and it doesn't have a sign on it, you know, and the architects say it really dies for a sign, you know.
So you were working with it before the sign. You were working on the interior?
No, just working with the architects on what would be the outcome. But I became a client of hers, and I did other things for her, other buildings and facades.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Was it basically for Hamburger Hamlets at that time? Or was it after that?
There were new adventures, like they were trying to break into new things. They wanted to sell Hamburger Hamlet, you know, so then they wanted their own personal, you know, piggy
So
banks.
Kate was one of them.
Right, yeah.
And then there was something in Westwood.
Yeah.
Another restaurant that they had.
Yeah.
So what about Cool House then? What do you do there?
So Cool House today is more of a digital, you know,
Yeah,
house
what is that?
on one side. Well, what I finally understood as a consultant, that I had to move on and create my own work. And then by creating my own work, I had all these surfaces that were digital. So I was able to make a, you know, put it from my computer to a cover like that.
I see.
Or a sign, or, you know, or a CAD movie on architecture. And
You come up with all these ideas, and you're not really cutting edge because you're making the cutting edge.
yes.
Isn't that right?
Right.
Like you're ahead of the edge.
Cultural fashion. Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And before we leave, tell us the influence. I think you've had a great influence on Shepard Fairey and on these street painters.
But he mutually agrees.
He agrees?
Yes.
Does he?
Right,
Yes,
yeah.
because I saw that picture of your Indian with the
Yeah.
rays.
In Las Vegas, there's the what they call a Fremont experience, where John Jurdy made a kind of like a colonnade there. You know? And then they, on the inside surface, they put these lights that then became LED lights later on, 12 million lights. And so it's 1,500 feet long, and I made a little movie for that, a 7-minute movie that runs.
That it runs in, but that's kind of like
So it
James
runs-
Turrell too, isn't it?
Exactly. Just no one really, I don't have the intellect, the scholar, to go up there and say, this is a
James-
light and form.
Exactly,
in its
light.
best, in
Right.
its most contemporary form.
But so you're just saying it's an LED and you did a film. So
Yeah,
is that all digital
so
too?
The first, yeah, so it's all digital. You know, it's done on a big computer that chops it all up and puts it on these little 12 by 24 squares.
So
and,
it's a
and
really,
it's in surround sound, so it has this boom, boom. You know, it's much more lively than Turrell's.
yes,
image,
I
yeah.
said it's a real, well, it's, I hate to say cutting edge again, but it's a
culture.
fine line
Yes.
between
So-
what you call fine art and what you call what
Yes,
you're
yeah,
doing really.
Yeah.
For the
So
masses. Masses see yours.
30 million people saw it
See?
over a 3-year period of time. Now it's on for another year, and then I'm going back and doing another one that'll open next
So you
year.
do another film.
Yeah, another film.
Yeah, and that many people don't go to museums.
Right, exactly.
Isn't that
You know,
right?
I'm starting this traveling show of my drawings, you know, and I'm asking around, so how many people see
No,
what, you know? So Jeff Landau says, well, you know, 5 events, it will be like, let's say 15 to 25,000 people.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
pretty good, yeah. Okay. We're glad that you told us what was going on, and I'm glad that you said that about Shepard, because
Yeah.
Shepard did a show, a retrospective, in his gallery, which obviously was an homage to you.
Yes, right, yeah. And you know, he has a hard time. Well, the interesting part of careers is that here you see 50 years. In his case, you see 20 years. And then that's eclectic and sorted out and made into an homage to himself. But essentially, client-wise, he has to go to work with clients and with their needs, you know.
Yeah,
So
which is what you conquered early on in your life.
Yes, right. So
I
for now, it works for him where they come to him for his images.
I see.
But then, you know, later in life, you have to deal with the corporation.
To make a book. Okay, thanks,
Okay, all
John.
right, you're welcome.
And thanks for watching this part of the Joan Quinn Profiles. And keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. Bye.